Hey everybody, just want to talk to you guys today about basics of lead writing. Lead writing is so important because it's really what gets the reader's attention. It's the hook of any good news article, and it lets the reader know what the most important information is. But there are definitely some ways to create a better lead than others. So let's go through them. So we all know that news gives readers information that's of interest to them. So one of the first things that we have been looking at is the idea that news comes in a variety of shapes and forms. It also comes in and it deals with tons and tons of different types of information, from celebrity news to weird stuff happening in the world to politics, sports, etc. So news is anything that can happen as long as it just interests your audience. So what is a lead? So a lead is the first sentence of the story, and it's the beginning of anything that you write, and it tells the most important information and the newest information directly to the reader. It grabs your reader's attention because people get pretty bored sometimes when they're reading and they're looking for something interesting to read, and it's their chance to kind of latch onto your article. So what must your lead do? Your lead has to start a flow of energy for your story. That means that it has to tell something that's interesting about the subject of the story, and it has to show the significance of why they should read what you're writing. And it also sets the pace and tone of how you write, and it establishes your voice, which is all very important, and it gets the reader going. So here are some great different examples of student written leads. She peeked around the door leading to the 500 hall. Hey, she whispered, is Miss Solomon looking? 5 minutes later, the girl with darting eyes would be silently speed walking towards the black gate, trying to leave school during sea lunch. Freshman Noah Barboza likes to spend his time lifting at the gym, not lifting textbooks around school. Barboza is constantly struggling with the pain of carrying his books around campus on his way to his 8 class periods. At first glance, senior basketball player Myron Dewar might pass through all the halls unnoticed. His only striking feature is his strange, indifferent gaze that seems to hide his past, his thoughts, his inner turmoil. So those are some great written leads that have a definite style and a tone and a voice to them. They're all established through kind of a basic formula that I'm going to share with you right now. So the news or summary lead, what do your readers need to know most, is the most important fact that you should kind of keep in mind. All right, and of course that summary lead tells the 5 W's and the H in 25 words or fewer. It starts with the most important or interesting information first, and it can start with any of the 5 W's or H's, but some choices are definitely better than others. For instance, there are different types of news leads, and these are the most oftenly used. The what lead, and it starts with what happened or what the story is about. And the why lead, it begins with the cause of the story or why it happened, and then the how lead begins with how the event happened. So what happened, why it happened, and how it happened are usually the ones that are used most often. And then the who lead is used sometimes. We saw a lot of examples that I just showed you in the student works there are mostly who leads that starts with a person or a group. And this is important to do if that person is interesting or well known on campus or is a celebrity. The ones that you really want to avoid are these two right down here, the when lead and then the where lead. This begins with time. And that's never really an important factor because you're not sure when your readers or your audience are going to be reading your story. So it's always good to kind of not lead with that. And the where, we can mostly assume that the where lead isn't that important because from where we're writing, most people know that where we are for the most part. So the who lead is one of the most important ones. And when the person you're writing about is the most important reason you're writing the story, then start with the who. For instance, let's say the president will greet students in the courtyard on Thursday. That's kind of has definitely a celebrity or a prominence value to it, and we want to lead with that. All right. Or maybe students will no longer be allowed to leave campus for lunch due to excessive after-lunch tardies, Principal Joe Blow said Tuesday. You don't necessarily want to start with Principal Joe Blow announced Tuesday that students will no longer be allowed to leave campus for lunch. So in this one, we're starting with what is going on versus the who of it here, okay? So the most important information comes first, not necessarily who said it all the time. The who lead does not need a name to work, and sometimes identifying the who by an occupation or accomplishment will do it. So here's an example. Yes, Endurance swimmer Diana Niad, 64, became the first person to complete a 110-mile swim from Cuba to Florida without a shark cage. It took her 53 hours. What a great lead. In this case, we're not starting with the name of Diana Niad because we know we need to know a little bit more. We wouldn't really know anything about Diana, and so we use her kind of credibility, because she's an endurance swimmer. The when lead is something that you don't necessarily want to start with a time element. It's almost never the most important factor, and this is a very common one that most beginning writers use. So on Tuesday, Principal Joe Blow announced that students will no longer be able to leave campus for lunch. It doesn't really work, and I guess the only real time that you would use a when lead is if it's for an anniversary story or some sort of holiday. So 50 years ago, on November 22nd, President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed in Dallas. Um, in such kind of cases, this makes a lot more sense because you have to establish the time as a part of the story. But that's a very rare circumstance. So you kind of want to stay away from that. The where lead is also one that you don't want to start with either, because it's not the most important factor. It's the decisions behind what is happening, or the action, that's the most important. For instance, here's one for a school board on the off-campus lunch policy. At the school board meeting on Tuesday, see, that's not the most important stuff at all that we really need to know here. What's more important is that the ended off-campus lunch policy has stopped. So you can incorporate this into it, but it's not as important. In the principal's office, so again, in this case, you might want to start with the action. So if we take out this little clause here, we have the senior class dump 30 pounds of sand to protest the cancellation of the senior trip to Cancun in the principal's office. So you definitely want to start with the action first of who did it or what happened. And again, why is this type of lead rarely, almost never used? It's because it's not the most important action. On the topic of where, news writers handle the where with a dateline or a city name in all caps before the lead to say where the story originated. And this really is good for international news or things that are outside of the community. But if you're doing local news, it's not really as important, right? And then the why lead. This kind of lead starts a story by explaining why something unusual happened, what caused it to happen, and this is one that is used definitely often. To carry on a tradition that started in the 1970s, 4 seniors streaked across the football stadium during the homecoming pep rally wearing only paper lays and tennis shoes. So in this case, we're starting with the why they did it, and then the action of who did it. And I don't suggest that you do that at all. The how lead is similar to the why lead, that it kind of explains how something happens, and it's usually interesting. So through a grassroots effort by young voters, so now we know the how. How did this come apart? Gilbert Castillo, 18, won the election Tuesday to become the youngest mayor in the city's history. So that is good, but there's also other better ways to write that. The what lead, this is used the most often. What happened? And it's what I encourage you to do as you get started with writing. What happened is what people care mostly about, and so you just get right to it. So here are some examples. The Harry Potter series and Lord of the Rings series won't be found on school library shelves this fall. Or school libraries will remove the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter series from shelves this fall. Both of those are good kind of leads, or what leads, because we know what happened. And then from there, that really captures the reader's attention. Here's a great what lead. More than 300 women were shot, stabbed, strangled, beaten, bludgeoned, or burned to death over the past decade by men in South Carolina, dying at a rate of over 12 days, while the state does little to stem the carnage from domestic abuse. This is a real lead. It's very disturbing, but it also captures the reader's attention. And unfortunately, it is pretty much true. As you can see, it won the 2015 Pulitzer Prize for Public Service. But this is a great case of a lead that really captures the reader's attention. As soon as you read that, you want to know why this happened, and that's kind of answered here because so it really links the reader in pretty quickly. So why learn to write the summary lead? Well, because it gives you the basic information first. It's great for establishing a quick understanding, especially if we're going to be using the inverted pyramid style. It's the easiest and quickest one to do. And then from there are the different types of leads that we can definitely look into. There's the anecdotal lead or narrative, the idea of telling a story. And then there's the descriptive scene setting lead as well. Um, and these are some pretty good ones to use, and they really grab the reader's attention quickly, and it also depends on how long or lengthy your article is going to be. If you're writing a basic news summary um, using the inverted pyramid, you don't want to have a lengthy narrative or tell a story. You want to get the facts out. But if you are using an expansive story writing, maybe it's like a 500 to 600 to 700 word, or even 1,000, 1,500 word uh, piece, you're going to want to include a different style. So that anecdotal narrative is important, or just kind of establishing the setting of where most of the information is going to take place is important. But for the kind of writing that we're going to start out with, a basic news lead of what happened, how it happened, why it happened are the most important ones to use. So there are definitely three different types of leads that you're going to want to avoid. The question lead, which is a very common one that young writers like to use, is kind of just basic in its form. Okay, so you want to kind of stay away from that. Or the have you ever wondered about, and then finally the idea of the quote lead. The quotes need context, so seldomly do you ever want to start with a quote. You just want to start with more of the what's going on. All right, and then the topic leads. It's not just to state the topic of your story. So here's some bad ones. On April 25th, and right there, we already have a date. So when it happened is what we want to stay at the Shockley Community Center where it happened. Prom was held. That's kind of very boring. We want to talk more about what happened at the prom, who was at the prom, what they look like. Those are more important. The school board met Tuesday to discuss problems with school lunch. The Bulldogs played the Hurricanes Friday in a crucial conference game, and with Thanksgiving coming, people are thinking about food. You know, those are just very basic leads that don't really tell the reader anything about what's going on. And those are kind of fun ones that we can kind of manipulate if we wanted to. So every story needs a summary, regardless of what you're writing about. The 5 W's and H belong in the story. If you get in the habit of writing a summary lead for every story, you'll always have the basics covered. And that's the most important part, is that we want to get those basics covered in the first paragraph in that lead, so that we can kind of move on and add more information and hook our readers into your writing. As a bonus, your featured leads will have a better focus because they have to lead into your summary. And that's the best part about it, is that your lead really establishes, it captures the reader's attention, but it also tells them what you're going to talk about later on in the piece. So how do you write an effective news lead? Pretty simple. It's a 4-step process. How to write an effective news lead: you collect all your facts and first, all right? And once you have that, you kind of chalk it out, and you simply just write down the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay, so that what person or group is the story about. All right, what happened, when, where did it happen, why did this happen, and how did it happen? And by simply just kind of filling out this information first, you're going to be able to come up with a better understanding of what you really want to talk about, and also organize your story. And this is true for any video that you might want to make as well. Knowing where you're headed, how you want to organize your story, it's so important. So these skills definitely transfer over, not only into the writing world, but also into telling the same information in a video as well. All right. How do you write an effective news lead? You sum it up and you boil it down. If you had just 10 seconds to tell the story, what would you say? Start from there. What would you say about that story? How would you tell it to your best friend? How would you tweet it? And if telling your mom, would you tell it differently? Tell the story out loud to a friend. So whatever story that you have, try to tell it out loud to make it compelling and interesting. And kind of think about how these questions in the back of your head. You have 10 seconds to tell the story. What would you say? Always prioritize the 5 W's. Which of the 5 W's or H are most compelling, or the most interesting? And again, you're going to want to write those down as the who, what, where, why, and how. Fill it in, and then kind of star the ones that you want to start with, and then write a draft of your lead focusing on the facts. And again, use the who only if the person is someone who's interesting or prominent, and always avoid using the when and where. So always focusing on the what, the why, or the how things have happened or occurred, or what's interesting out of those three. It makes your life a lot easier. And then, how do you write an effective news lead? You rethink it, you rewrite it, and you revise it. Here's where you stop thinking that your first draft is good enough, because it's probably not. Okay, so is this clearly written? Does it make sense to somebody else? All right, is it in the active voice? Who did what to whom? Be concise. Don't use a lot of clauses. Use your language to be succinct. Use your language to be succinct. I'm having a hard time with that one. Uh, are there extra words you don't need? And will this grab the readers and make them want to keep reading? Those are the questions you really got to ask yourself, and as you finalize your work. All right. Here's your assignment. What I would like for you to do is I want you to create a concept map or a short paragraph. It's totally up to you. Okay, using your notes from this presentation and any other resource that you might have available from what we've talked about in class or what you find online. Create a summary of what a lead is. Okay, name each of the 5 W's and H's and when they should be used to start a story. And then describe the 4-step process of how to write a summary lead as a subcategory with 4 prongs. Okay, so you can either kind of map this all out as a visual graphic, or you can just simply write me a paragraph. That information and your final work can be submitted online to It's Learning in the area below.